the second article of the day. The topic that I've taken is the COP27. We know that recently COP26 was held in Glasgow, and now COP27 is to be held. And if I am not wrong, it will be held in Egypt. All right. Now, this article that I have taken is from the Indian Express, and the title of the article was "We Need Forest-Led COP27." Now we will discuss the important points the writer has taken from the writer has presented. But before that, let's discuss the context of this article. You can relate this topic. You can relate this article with your General Studies Paper 3, that is Conservation, Environment, and Climate Change. And now let's look at the context in which this article was written. A study was published in the journal Sciences. This is the journal, and a study was published, and the study said that Earth may already have passed through 5 dangerous tipping points due to the 1.1 Celsius of global heating, which is caused by the humanity to date. Now, what is this tipping point? Now, basically, tipping point is a phase in this is a phase in the geological time scale, or you can say it is a phase in the environmental climate change where there is no return. So if I say that if the global if I say if the globe or the earth has already passed or it has already passed this stage of 1.5 degrees Celsius rise, then from there the earth cannot be reverted back, because the changes which have led to this 1.5 degrees Celsius rise cannot be mitigated, or they cannot be reversed. So tipping point is basically a point of no return. So now let us discuss the important points that writer has presented here. So I have taken the opinion of the writer here, and let's see what the writer wants to say when he and she says the forest led COP27. Now the both the writers speaks about the technology, that how the technology which is needed to mitigate the climate change, it needs to be developed, and it also needs to be developed to the third world countries, the least developed countries, and the developing countries. However, the writer also points towards the techno determinism and its flaws. What is this techno determinism or techno optimism? Basically, when we say techno optimism, that means we try to include technology in everything that we do, in every dimension of our life, in every dimension of the economic establishments, and every dimension of the any institution which is helping in governing this whole earth. So we are trying to include technology in everything. However, the writer says that technology is not a solution, and the alarming rate at which we are relying on the technology will not be sufficient, and it will make us unprepared to deal with the climate change. So at present, techno determinism and techno optimism is not necessarily a right approach, and it has to be balanced with other approaches also, and or we can say the nature led mitigation, or the nature led conservation or elevation of the climate change, adverse effect of the adverse elevation of the adverse effect of the climate change. So now the writer says that technology alone is insufficient. So therefore the writer talks about that how the technology alone is insufficient and unprepared to deal with the climate change. Now let's move on and talk about what technological optimism is. Basically, technological optimism can be defined as a doctrine that a growing number of technological improvements in areas such as the food production, the environmental quality, and the energy, they will help sustain human population. Now this is what technological optimism is. Now if I take example of a technology which will be helpful in mitigating the climate change, then we will see that how technology alone cannot help humanity progress towards a state of environmental conservation and protection. So let's take one example of a technology. Suppose if we say the clean energy. If I'm taking an example of a clean energy, then clean energy would require a technology that will require investment and other infrastructure. that will require investment and other infrastructure. And these two things would lead to climate change. If say we are having paperless or driverless car, if we are going paperless, we are moving towards digitization. If we are moving towards digitization, then it is at the cost of environment, because the computer system and the software system which would be needed to drive this technological and to drive the digital world will cause the environmental change. Let's say the cryptocurrency, or let's say the bitcoins. In order to go paperless, we will require heavy machinery to run these computers, which is invariably lead to climate change. Therefore, the technological optimism is not a good idea. Technology may help or it may aid in elevating the climate change, but it alone is unprepared, and it alone is not a good idea to completely rely upon. Now, Lighter actually gives some of the example that how COP26 was technology oriented, and it was more focused on technological optimism. Writer talks about that every technology that was discussed in COP26 to mitigate the climate change. The first is the N electricity, which is non-emitting electricity. What is this non-emitting electricity? Something which does not generate the carbon or other harmful global warming gases. So if we are relying more on the coal, if we're relying more on coal, then we are probably emitting carbon. But if we are relying on hydropower, renewables, nuclear fissions, etc., etc., then another then we are moving towards the N electricity. That means we are moving towards the non-emitting electricity. Now, another thing that the writer points out towards is the carbon capture storage. The carbon capture storage. Now, what is this? It is basically the carbon which is emitted when it comes uh, during the generation of the electricity. Let's say the hydrogen. So when we are generating hydrogen, so there are three important ways through which the hydrogen can be generated for the hydrogen mission that was recently launched. It is green hydrogen, gray hydrogen, and blue hydrogen. Now, the gray hydrogen is generated from fossil fuels, and the blue hydrogen, and we have this green hydrogen. So, when we speak of the green hydrogen, we are basically, what we mean is that we are capturing and we are storing the carbon. All right, so this was one technology that was discussed. Now let's look at the third technology that was discussed is the biomass generation. Now, if humanity is to completely rely on the biomass, then the writer points towards that currently we have 100 kg of plants consumed by one person. All right, 100 kg plant based food is consumed by one person. And if we are to produce enough biokerosene to fly, then we would probably require 200 kg of additional harvest. Then we would probably require 200 kg of the additional harvest. So, therefore, the writer points out the flaws in this principle of technological optimism. Now, let's see what the writer speaks when he says the concerns which are associated with the technological optimism. The first concern that the writer raised that the proposals which are outlined in the COP26 they are not sufficient to meet all the demands of for those resources by 2050. The writer gives that suppose if currently each person has access to 4 kilowatt or hour of net electricity each day. However, the COP26 proposes to increase it to 32, which will require additional work and which will require additional generation of the electricity. Even if the electricity comes from the electricity, we will be requiring dams, we will be requiring infrastructure, etc., which anyway would lead to the climate change. Yeah, I was speaking about the N electricity. That Each day, a person requires 4 kilowatt hour of energy, and according to the COP26 proposal, it is to be increased to 32. Now, let me take example of the Kuznets curve now. Kuznets curve. All right. Now, what happens is we are specifically speaking of the environmental Kuznets curve. Now, it says that as the development proceeds, the environmental degradation will also increase, and when the development is reached to the peak level, then slowly it will be brought down. This is what the environmental Kuznets curve says. However, this seems to be incorrect because the damage which has already been done here because of the climate change and the global warming and its adverse effect cannot be reversed here. We can only have the land degradation neutrality, but we cannot have a complete reversal of the climate change, or we cannot have the complete reversal of what has already been done. All right, so that's why writer points out towards this technology, towards the flaws that this technological optimism. Writer gives another example of biokerosene, which we I have already discussed. Writer gives example of the and electricity, and writer also says that the plants which are presented at the COP26, there is no chance that these will have these in sufficient quantities to meet the demands. However, the tech centric mitigation conversation leaves forest economies and subjects such as conservation and forest. Now, writer is coming towards his main point, and that is forest led COP27. Whatever that had been discussed in the COP26 with respect to the technological need and the technological transfer in order to mitigate the climate change, writer says what has been left out from the COP26 talks is the forest economies and subjects such as conservation and forest. Therefore, the writer says that in the next COP27, which is to be held, if I'm not wrong, in Egypt, then it has to be forest led. The center point of the COP27 should be forest. And forest, according to the writers, are the best removal tools when it comes to the when it comes to removing the carbon, when it comes to acting as a sink for the carbon storage. Now let's see the importance or the significance of the forest. But before that, let's see few important facts when it comes to the forest in India. First is, according to the State of Forest report that was published in the year 2021, India has approximately 24.06 percentage of the forest. All right, and there are the five topmost state which has seen increase in the forest is the Andhra and the topmost state which saw the increase in the forest is the Andhra Pradesh. We have Jharkhand, we have Maharashtra, Telangana, etc., etc. And according to the State of Forest report, it was pointed that Andhra Pradesh, the increase in the forest area of Andhra Pradesh was due to the agroforestry. Was due to agroforestry. All right. Now the writer talks about that how in one of the studies it was said that the change in that the biophysical characteristics of the forest, it causes an additional 0.5 percentage cooling of the earth, and up to 27% of the emission reductions which are required to combat climate change, they can be met by protecting the forest and other natural alternatives. Writer has also given example of the independent review on the economics of the biodiversity, mangroves, and salt marshes by Das Gupta, that how these are the green infrastructure which are 2 to 5 times more affordable than the grey infrastructures. All right, and writer also gives example of another study that was conducted between the year 2015 and the year 2017, that how the loss of the tropical forest cover resulted in 4.8 billion tons of the annual gross carbon emission. That means the forest which are the natural sink, the forest, they are the natural sink of the carbon. They need to be protected if we want to combat the climate change. We cannot completely rely on the technology. All right. So, the writer has given certain facts about the energy supply sector, which contributes to the anthropogenic greenhouse gas emission. That energy sector alone contributes to the 34% is contributed by the energy sector alone, which includes industry. Then other sectors are followed by industry, and then other sectors which emits greenhouse gases are agriculture, the paddy field, the forestry, the land use, transportation, buildings, etc. Now let's see the initiatives which the government of India has taken. The first initiative that was taken by the government of India is the NAP, which is the National Afforestation Program, and we have got programs like Riksharopan, etc., etc., going on in several states. In fact, Andhra Pradesh saw the rise in the forest cover because of the agroforestry only. So therefore, National Forest Program becomes important. We have got Green India Mission. We have Forest Fire Prevention and Management Scheme. Green India Mission, it tends to it not only Green India Mission seeks not only to expand the coverage of the forest but also to improve the forest quality. It also, in addition to these, it also have a cross sectional operational on a landscape level. National Afforestation Program is implemented on the degraded forest lands. The forest fire prevention and management strategies are handled by the FFPM, that is management. Yeah. Additionally, the fund money is raised by the CAMPA fund so as to compensate the loss of the forest, so as to conserve the wildlife, etc. Now, the writer has given some future steps that can be taken so as to reduce the climate change adverse effect and so as to mitigate the adverse effect of the climate change. The first it talks about it, writer gives example of the IPCC land report, and it talks about that how land is a significant sink. So therefore we started with the technological change. We started with that how technology alone would be insufficient to deal with the climate change. We speak of the technological determinism that is seen, or optimism that is seen in various dimensions of the daily life. And then we are talking about that how the COP27, which is to be held, has to be different from the COP26, and what different and how different it would be if it is oriented towards the conservation of the forest. Therefore, the writer says the forest led COP27. So we have got land, we have to focus on the land, we have to focus on the forest, and we have to focus on the other natural resources as well. So writer has given example of the IPCC land report, that how land act as a carbon sink. So increasing body of research, etc., they have suggested that protecting the natural schemes would enhance the biodiversity protection, and it will help regenerating the ecosystem. So basically it talks about that the best and the most equitable method to address the climate catastrophe is to maintain the earth cyclical process. The natural cycle that earth goes through has to be protected. We have to protect the interlinkages between flora and fauna and the ecosystem as a whole. So with this, we conclude today's editorial analysis. I hope you will understand this, and hopefully if the question appears with respect to the conservation of the forest and other environmental resources, these important points will help you deal with the question. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching Tarun IS. Have a nice day.